Thanks so much for having me with you today. And I'm going to use the opportunity to sort of spend our time looking at how we scale diversity at Google and some of the learnings that we've had along the way. And for us, actually, diversity, equity, and inclusion are business imperatives. So if we get it right, it really does improve outcomes for our employees, our products, and you, our users. So we're really truly committed to sort of continuing to make what we call diversity, equity, and inclusion part of everything we do, right from sort of building our products through to how we build our workforce. And I'm going to share today, that we've made progress in several areas, but also we still have a lot to do. But I think the key theme will be in everything we do, we look at how we can scale, and that's to over 100,000 employees across about 150 offices worldwide. So what you can see there is the 7 principles that I'm going to talk through in terms of how we support scale. So that's starting with transparency, using data to inform decisions, approaching diversity as a business challenge, the fact that it's everyone's ownership but starts with leadership, that we embed it as part of our culture, that we think global but act local, and that it is a marathon, not a sprint. So if we start with transparency, you'll see that Google have published the Diversity Annual Report since 2014. And we were one of the first in our industry actually to publish this data. And that catalyzed this conversation of diversity in tech. So that was where we started in 2014. And since then, we've been publishing more and more granular data and intersectional data, also looking at initiatives that work and then others that haven't worked so well. And using that data to inform decisions is the second key principle of how we get scale. So as you can see here, we believe data is a catalyst and that we continually expand that data to inform our strategy. So we started, just by looking at representation data. But if we could go to the previous slide, in 2019, you'll see we began gathering data on other aspects of identity, and that's through voluntary self-identification. So asking our employees, we call them Googlers, but really asking them to, whether they identify as LGBTQ, non-binary gender, disability, military veteran status. So again, this is done globally. We're scaling across the world to understand in every region how people identify. And we're lucky that actually the majority of our employees have given us and have participated in that campaign. And then we're analyzing these demographics alongside inclusion data to understand actually how are our employees from different groups experiencing working at Google. And then how do we use that information to kind of inform and expand our strategy in a really data-driven way. And what we have done around data is look at how it drives accountability and progress. So with diversity, equity, inclusion, I think the natural way is to think about representation. What's our current picture? But actually, we view representation as the end state of just a really simple equation. So it's hiring minus attrition. And so you'll see in our diversity annual report, that's the way that we measure it with those 2 inputs. And what you see here is our picture as we stand now. So, in 2019, we had nearly 1 in 3 of our Googlers are women, clearly still more work to do. You can see that, in terms of hiring, actually our hiring picture mirrors our representation. So about 1/3 of hires are women. And our attrition at Google is overall low, but actually our attrition levels for women overall are lower than men. And you can see representation in leadership, around 25% globally, again, highlighting lots of opportunities there. So approaching diversity as a business challenge, and I know this won't be unique to Google, but we genuinely do approach it like we would approach any other business challenge. So what does that mean? We have clear goals. We set those up right from the start, and we have OKRs. So for us, that's our objectives and key results that are aligned with those goals. We set up a dedicated team. That's a team of experts with the right level of resourcing. We put together an action plan, and that's got clear initiatives, timelines, and owners. We review that rigorous review. So we do review progress regularly with leadership holding us accountable. And then we track metrics to make sure that that reporting is available ongoing for leaders. And as we look at how we then take ownership, it does start with leadership. But actually, I think what is really special at Google is that everybody feels an owner of this. And what you see here is kind of the ecosystem of our diversity, equity, and inclusion work that's spread across the organization. So this work is not isolated in a separate function. It really lives and breathes everywhere. So the employee engagement team that I am part of, we set the strategy and of course bring expertise, but actually the functional areas and the countries are those who are responsible for taking that strategy and then adapting it to the specific issues they face. And then, of course, the important part of executing on it. I'll talk a little bit later more about our employee resource groups. You'll see it there as ERGs. But they're critical, not just about bringing the voice of underrepresented groups to the table, but actually inputting into strategy and the execution of that strategy. We've got champions, for example, spread across the organization. We see them as our kind of eyes and ears on the ground to make sure that we understand, the texture of the issues and the depth of the issues faced by our employees. And I think what's also unique is our employees produce a lot of grassroots initiatives, and our role is then to support and energize and scale those. And one of those examples that's probably worth mentioning that some of you may have heard of is a program called I Am Remarkable, started by one employee who really saw an opportunity to think about how we empower women and underrepresented groups to celebrate their achievements, to realize that they are remarkable. And that one program has now scaled to 800 companies who are using this workshop. It's in 130 countries. There are 7,000 trained facilitators who've delivered over 10,000 workshops. I think that's probably, a really great example of taking an idea and then scaling it. So anyone that hasn't come across that and is interested for their organizations, it's iamremarkable.withgoogle.com. But to engage everyone in DEI, in our region, specifically in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, we launched a program called It's Up to Me. So it's an internal initiative. It's scaled across the region of over 30 countries, but really focused on making sure that individuals understand that it's up to them. If we're going to move the culture forward, each individual has to take personal responsibility. And that helps the community at large. And so what we've got is individual managers and leaders having to have an OKR, so their own objective around diversity, and they need to be modeling those inclusive behaviors and demonstrating that as part of their performance. And in the middle, you'll see we have a DEI council that's made up of cross-functional leadership who take responsibility of course, setting a strategy, reviewing progress, course correcting where needed, and then holding leaders in their organizations responsible as well. A key area, and I know challenge for many organizations, is how we embed diversity as part of culture. And that's the fifth strand of also how we scale. And at Google, we have the opportunity of really having DEI as our strongest pillar of our culture. So it's included in our values, and you'll see there Google's values are our 3 respects. And just a little bit of context, our values are how we conduct ourselves in the pursuit of our mission. So the idea is they are owned personally by us, but also collectively by all of us. And so they're very much at the heart, this balance of the trust extended to us, but also the responsibility that we accept as being part of this company. So the 3 respects are respecting the user, respecting the opportunity, and respecting each other. And hopefully it's evident there that diversity is very much embedded within those respects. And I mentioned earlier about our employee resource groups, and I think it's just worth a pause and sharing a little bit more about them, because we are really proud to support the employee resource groups that provide incredible additional support and community for our underrepresented employees and allies as well. So actually what you see there is the 16 employee resource groups that we have at Google, and more than 35,000 employees actively participate in a member of those. So that's 1 in 3 of our employees are really actively engaged in an employee resource group. They're completely employee initiated, And, the networks, they're passionate about promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion across Google, again, allowing us to scale. And these ERGs have exec sponsorship both at global level, but also importantly at local level. So leaders really engaging at ground level to understand how they can support those communities. And of course, this year has been a critical year to amplify that in so many ways. So on to thinking global and acting local. This is not a phrase unique to Google. And again, many organizations will be taking this approach of having a global strategy, but making sure that it resonates locally. And what you can see on the slide here is actually just examples of how we're approaching that work. So as Google continues to grow, we have a responsibility, we believe, to scale our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and to increase pathways. If we think about increasing pathways to tech, of course, our long-term vision of increasing representation. So in the cities and sites and, countries where Google operates, we really are, having programmatic work to support that. So yeah, these examples just demonstrate that there's a globally defined strategy, but then it is locally adapted to the countries that we're working in. And finally, this idea that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I think that's really critical. And just to give some context, something to consider. So someone born in 1998, which is the year that Google was founded, is actually only now completing university. So putting that into perspective, we'd actually think that the honest way to approach our work is to understand that real change has a long-term horizon. It's a 15 to 20-year horizon, and we must plan and invest accordingly. And, for us, so much has happened in the last decade in our own diversity, equity, and inclusion journey, both internally and, of course, some is evident externally as well. And I do just want to take a moment to reflect on what's happened this year, as an example, and, the crisis that we've all faced around racial equity and racial injustice. And one of the ways that Google has responded is a set of concrete commitments to move that work forward. And that's internally to build sustainable equity for our Google, what we call our kind of Google Black Plus community. So everyone that identifies as part of that community. But of course, externally, we want to make our products and our programs helpful in the sort of those moments that matter most to our Black users. And scaling that across every country that we operate in, of course, brings with it its own challenges. But for us, systemic change is sustainable change. So every incremental sort of progress we make, whether that's in hiring, whether that's progression, or whether that's retaining some of our underrepresented groups, that's hard-won work. And I know anyone that's in this field will know that making those changes takes a huge amount of effort from different directions all at the same time. And it is a holistic approach to these issues that will create that meaningful, sustainable change. We'll often hear this phrase about there being no silver bullet. And I think it's so true in the work we do. It really must be tackled sustainably from all angles. So we've got to continue to work to expand our talent pool externally, but also at the same time to improve our culture internally if we really want to create those equitable outcomes and inclusion for everyone. And the way we describe our long-term goal, as you'll see, our Chief Diversity Officer, Melanie Parker, says, is that our job is not done until every Googler feels like they belong. And our job is not to rest until we get there.